We
Imagine
understand your
being told that you
concerns.
couldn't sit in a certain seat, not because you were late,
What
but because
exactly
of
are
the
we going to
color
do
of your
about this?
skin. This wasn't a rule from decades ago. It happened in a school that claimed to teach equality. For one group of kids, every day felt like a silent punishment. But when the truth about this rule came out, it shocked everyone. Teachers, parents, even the principal. What kind of rule could be so cruel? And how did the students finally break free from it? Subscribe and join our community at first glance. Lincoln Middle School looked like any other school in town. The red brick walls, the busy hallways, the sound of sneakers squeaking on the gym floor, it all seemed so normal. For most kids, it was just another place to learn, laugh, and grow. But for Marcus, a quiet 12-year-old who loved drawing superheroes in the margins of his notebooks, school carried a heavier weight. Marcus wasn't the kind of kid who caused trouble. He got good grades, helped his mom with chores after school, and dreamed of one day becoming an architect. His friends described him as thoughtful and kind, the kind of boy who shared his lunch if someone forgot theirs. But despite his gentle nature, Marcus often felt the world around him was quietly pushing him aside. There were small things most kids never noticed: how teachers looked past him when volunteers were needed, how classmates sometimes whispered when he walked into the room, and how his achievements seemed invisible compared to others. Marcus never complained. He thought maybe this was just how life worked, that some kids were always chosen last. Still, he tried to focus on the good. He loved art class, he loved basketball, and most of all, he loved the idea that school was supposed to be a place where everyone was equal. Yet deep down, Marcus carried questions he didn't know how to ask. Why did certain rules feel unfair? Why did it seem like some students had freedoms he didn't? He didn't know it yet, but one rule at Lincoln Middle School would soon expose the painful truth he had been sensing all along. The moment that changed everything for Marcus began on a Monday morning in the cafeteria. Like every student, he carried his tray, hoping to grab a spot near his friends. But when he sat down, a teacher's aide approached and shook her head. "Not here," she said firmly, pointing to a different section. Confused, Marcus stood up and moved. At first, he thought nothing of it. Maybe it was just a random request, but the next day the same thing happened, and the day after that. Each time, Marcus was redirected, always to the same row of tables in the back, away from the windows, away from the light. Soon he noticed a pattern. The kids who looked like him, black and brown students, were always sent to that section. They weren't allowed to mix freely with the others. It wasn't written on a bulletin board or printed in a handbook, but it was a rule all the same. Unspoken, yet strictly enforced. Marcus tried to ignore it at first, but the sting grew sharper every day. His white classmates laughed and spread, out at the sunny tables near the front. Teachers walked past without questioning why the same group of kids was clustered in the back. Some even joked about it, calling it the overflow section, as if the students sitting there didn't deserve better. The injustice went deeper. In gym class, Marcus noticed another rule. Students like him were told to wait until everyone else chose teams before they could join. It was explained as keeping things organized, but Marcus could see the truth. It was segregation disguised as order. Each small act chipped away at him. His friends noticed too. One boy whispered, "Why do they always send us back here?" Another shrugged, too afraid to ask. Marcus wanted to believe the adults had good reasons, but deep down he knew this wasn't about rules. It was about race. The worst part came when his artwork was selected for a school exhibition. Marcus had poured his heart into the piece, staying up late to perfect every detail. But on the day of the showcase, his drawing was missing. When he asked why, a teacher casually said there wasn't enough space to display everyone's work. Yet somehow, every other student's art was hanging on the walls. Marcus walked home that day with his sketch folded under his arm, his chest heavy. He began to realize that this wasn't a series of accidents. It was a system, one designed to remind kids like him where they did and didn't belong. But what Marcus didn't know was that the cracks in this system were about to widen. Whispers were starting to spread. Some parents had begun asking questions. A confrontation was coming, one that would drag the school's ugliest secret into the light. The breaking point came during the annual school assembly. Parents, teachers, and students filled the gymnasium, banners hanging proudly on the walls. It was supposed to be a celebration of achievement, honoring students who had worked hard all year. Marcus's name was on the list. For weeks, he had been told he'd receive recognition for his artwork. His mother even took the day off work to sit in the audience, smiling proudly from the bleachers. But when the awards began, Marcus's name was never called. One by one, he watched other students walk across the stage, some with projects no better than his. He waited, heart racing, convinced it was just a mistake. But the ceremony ended without his name ever being spoken. His mother's face fell, confusion turning into quiet heartbreak, and then the unthinkable happened. As students filed out, Marcus overheard two teachers talking near the stage. One of them laughed and said, "You know we can't start letting kids like him get all the attention. It sends the wrong message." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. The unfair seating, the missing artwork, the invisible achievements, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. The rules weren't written in books, but they were etched into the very culture of the school. Marcus felt frozen, his fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to scream, to call them out, to tell the world what he had just heard. But the weight of silence pressed, down harder than ever. His mother reached for his hand, and for the first time, he saw tears in her eyes. That night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the teacher's words echoing in his mind. He knew something had to change. What he didn't know was that the fight was only just beginning, and soon the entire school would be forced to confront the truth it had buried for years. The silence didn't last long. A few days after the assembly, Marcus's mother wrote a letter to the school board, describing everything she and her son had witnessed. Other parents began to step forward too, sharing stories of their children being moved to the back tables or overlooked during team selections. What Marcus once thought was his private burden suddenly became proof of a deeper, painful truth. The school could no longer hide behind excuses. A community meeting was called, and for the first time, the so-called unwritten rules were spoken aloud in front of parents, teachers, and administrators. The shame was undeniable. What was once quietly enforced now stood exposed under a harsh light. For Marcus, the change didn't erase the hurt, but it brought validation. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't overreacting. He had lived through an injustice that many tried to ignore. And now people were finally listening. The school began dismantling its practices, replacing them with diversity workshops, student councils, and open forums. But the scars reminded Marcus, and many others, how deep the problem truly ran. Looking back, Marcus realized the most painful part wasn't the cafeteria rule or the missing award. It was how easily grown adults normalized unfairness, teaching kids to accept less than they deserved. And that's where the story widens beyond Marcus. Because in schools, workplaces, and neighborhoods across the world, invisible rules still exist. Rules that silence voices, push people aside, and remind them of where they're allowed to belong. So the real question isn't just about Marcus's school, it's about ours. How many unspoken rules still shape the world we live in, and what will it take for us to finally break them? If this story touched you, don't just watch. Be part of the change. Hit subscribe and join our community of voices that matter.